Hollywood is no stranger to power games, secret alliances, and behind-the-scenes battles, but rarely has the spotlight turned so intensely on one of its most beloved couples, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. What started as a legal feud between Lively and Justin Baldoni has now exploded into a storm of speculation, drawing in whispers of money influence and manipulation. At the center of it all is a figure few ever expected to be accused of masterminding a Hollywood takedown. Ryan Reynolds, the man known for his humor charm and approachable everyman image, is now being painted by some insiders as the architect of a $9 million campaign designed to protect his wife and dismantle Baldoni. The whispers suggest this was no ordinary defense, but a calculated effort to control the narrative, overwhelm an opponent, and secure long-term dominance in an industry where perception is as valuable as profit. This revelation has shaken fans, industry insiders, and media commentators who are now questioning whether Reynolds' public persona is simply the surface of a much more complex strategist working in the shadows. The timing of leaks, the coordination of media coverage, and the relentless legal maneuvers all appear too precise to be random, fueling the belief that Reynolds has been guiding every move from behind the scenes if true. This marks not only one of the most shocking shifts in celebrity image, but also a glimpse into how modern Hollywood power truly operates. A world where millions can be deployed not only in courtrooms but also in newsrooms and on social media to ensure victory and control the story. This is the Hollywood drama no one saw coming, the unraveling of a carefully crafted image, and the question of whether Reynolds is really the mastermind of Blake Lively's fight against Justin Baldoni. The story that is now gripping Hollywood and shaking the foundations of celebrity power. Dynamics begins with whispers that soon turned into headlines, and headlines that exploded into a storm of speculation and drama. At the very heart of this whirlwind stands the powerful couple, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, with Justin Baldoni caught in the crossfire of what is increasingly being portrayed as a carefully orchestrated takedown. As the dust settles, new reports and theories point to Ryan Reynolds as the mastermind behind a $9 million strategy that was meant not just to shield Blake Lively, but to reposition their influence in Hollywood, and to silence Baldoni, who dared to challenge the status quo. The notion that Reynolds could be the architect of such a scheme has sparked debates across legal circles, entertainment media, and the broader public, who are now watching every development like an unfolding courtroom thriller. The allegations suggest that Reynolds, with his razor-sharp instincts for business and brand control, may have quietly funded or structured a multi-layered campaign to ensure that Baldoni would be boxed into legal disputes, drained of resources, and portrayed unfavorably in the public eye. Insiders point to the timing of events, the strategic leaks to media outlets, and the way narratives have been spun to protect Lively while cornering Baldoni as pieces of a puzzle that make more sense when viewed through the lens of Reynolds' deliberate orchestration. In this reading, Blake Lively becomes not merely an embattled actress fighting her own legal war, but a central figure shielded by the influence of her husband, whose connections span Hollywood studios, corporate sponsors, legal heavyweights, and media power players. To understand how this came to be, one must revisit the origins of the conflict and how Baldoni once hailed as a rising force with a reputation for integrity and visionary storytelling, suddenly found himself cast as an adversary to one of the industry's most tightly controlled power couples. The feud between Baldoni and Lively escalated publicly after a series of disputes involving project's credibility and behind-the-scenes clashes. But what the public did not fully grasp at the time was how quickly and thoroughly Baldoni became surrounded by obstacles. Legal filings emerged at a pace that left his team scrambling, and rumors about his professional standing circulated with unusual speed. Media narratives seemed to align almost too conveniently in favor of Lively, prompting speculation that someone with greater influence was pulling the strings. Observers who have tracked celebrity public relations for decades argue that the fingerprints of Reynolds can be seen in the smoothness with which negative stories about Baldoni spread, while favorable coverage of Lively dominated headlines. Reynolds, who has built a reputation not only as a leading man in Hollywood, but also as a shrewd businessman owning stakes in companies and guiding high-value brand campaigns, is no stranger to controlling narratives. His success has always been tied to mastering the art of perception and maintaining a spotless image even in the cutthroat world of entertainment industry. Insiders whisper that his ability to mobilize resources across multiple domains, from legal to financial to media, is unmatched, and it is this very capability that some believe was deployed against Baldoni. The figure of $9 million has surfaced in multiple speculative reports, pointing to a coordinated budget that was allegedly directed at funding legal strategies, hiring crisis management firms, engaging private investigators, and managing media narratives. Critics argue that no individual dispute typically involves such sums unless it is part of a broader campaign to secure dominance and silence. Opposition this number has since become the center of heated debate as commentators attempt to piece together whether it represents hard evidence of a master plan or the inevitable costs of a highly public and contentious battle. What is undeniable, however, is that Baldoni found himself facing overwhelming pressure at every turn, and the balance of power appeared heavily tilted against him throughout as more details trickle out the theory of Reynolds as the mastermind gains further traction, especially as analysts dissect his potential motives. While some claim his role was purely protective, a husband defending his wife, others argue that this was about more than family loyalty and was instead tied to long-term business and reputational stakes. Reynolds' brand thrives on portraying himself as charming, relatable, and trustworthy, a sharp contrast to the ruthless image that is now being projected in whispers of his involvement. Yet those who know the industry well argue that the most successful stars are often those who can manage dual identities, presenting warmth to the public while maintaining steely control behind the curtain. The strategy attributed to Reynolds if true mirrors corporate warfare where rivals are not merely countered but systematically weakened through sustained campaigns that leave them isolated, financially exhausted, and publicly diminished. For Baldoni, the challenge was not only in defending himself legally, but also in maintaining his credibility, as narratives began painting him as embattled and reactive, rather than visionary and forward-looking. Supporters of Baldoni point out that his track record of socially conscious projects and his reputation as a grounded leader do not align with the negative portrayals that suddenly saturated the media. They argue that the orchestration of such portrayals can only be explained by deliberate interference from forces determined to rewrite the storyline. Meanwhile, Lively's position in this saga has been both shielded and elevated as narratives place her in a sympathetic light. The question that hangs in the air is whether she is a co-architect of the strategy or primarily the beneficiary of her husband's behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Critics note that Lively's statements have often been carefully curated, her public appearances precisely timed, and her legal filings aligned in ways that mirror the rhythm of media cycles. This coordination further fuels speculation of a larger strategy at work. The situation has now evolved into more than just a legal battle. It is a test case of how modern celebrity power operates in an age where perception is currency, and narratives can be weaponized as effectively as legal arguments. The $9 million figure looms as a symbol of just how high the stakes have become, and how far those with influence are willing to go to protect their position and shape outcomes. Commentators predict that the unraveling of this saga could have ripple effects across Hollywood, altering how future disputes are managed and exposing the extent to which powerful figures will marshal resources, not only to win battles, but to reshape the very terrain upon which those battles are fought. As the drama deepens, questions remain unanswered. Was Baldoni simply caught in a storm of bad luck, or was he the target of an unprecedented campaign, masterminded by one of Hollywood's most calculating players? And if Reynolds indeed orchestrated the takedown, how much longer can the illusion of his charming public image be sustained before cracks begin to show in a way that even he cannot control? As the speculation intensifies, more voices within Hollywood have begun to weigh in on the possibility that Ryan Reynolds is not just a passive bystander, but an active force guiding the entire strategy behind Blake Lively's legal battle against Justin Baldoni. What makes this theory more compelling is not only Reynolds' proven track record of controlling his brand and enterprises, but also the consistency with which media cycles have played out in a way that appears to favor Lively and discredit Baldoni in moments when Baldoni seemed to be regaining ground. New obstacles appeared, whether in the form of fresh filings, damaging leaks, or sudden bursts of negative coverage that shifted the narrative once again in Lively's favor. Some observers argue that this pattern cannot be coincidental and points to a carefully managed plan funded at great cost to ensure that no matter how strong Baldoni fought, the balance of power always tilted against him. The figure of $9 million emerges again here, not as an arbitrary number, but as the approximate tally of what experts estimate such a comprehensive campaign would require. This would include millions for top-tier attorneys known not only for courtroom skills, but also for their ability to work hand in glove with media consultants, public relations teams who can seed favorable stories across major outlets, crisis management experts who specialize in redirecting public attention away from damaging narratives, and even the quiet work of private investigators whose findings can sometimes be leveraged to discourage opponents or shape negotiations to outside observers. Such a budget might seem extravagant, but in the world of celebrity reputation management, where careers and long-term earnings are on the line, it is seen as an investment rather than an expense. Reynolds, with his vast fortune accumulated not just from films, but from business ventures in beverages, technology, and sports marketing, certainly has the capacity to deploy such funds without significant strain. Insiders suggest that his involvement stems from both personal loyalty to his wife and a keen understanding of how fragile celebrity brands can be in an era when a single damaging narrative can derail careers or close doors to major opportunities. The calculated nature of this campaign, if true, reflects Reynolds' business instincts transferred from the corporate boardroom into the legal battlefield by ensuring that Lively never appeared isolated or vulnerable. And by surrounding Baldoni with relentless pressure, Reynolds would not only be defending his family, but also sending a broader message that challenging their influence comes with overwhelming costs. Critics of this alleged orchestration argue that such tactics cross ethical boundaries and risk exposing a darker underbelly of Hollywood, where image is manufactured at any cost and truth becomes secondary to perception. They warn that if evidence emerges, linking Reynolds directly to the strategic funding and coordination, it could unravel not only his carefully cultivated image, but also cause ripples across his businesses, which thrive on the trust and admiration of consumers. Yet for now, no direct evidence has surfaced, only patterns, timelines, and the uncanny precision with which narratives have unfolded. Baldoni, meanwhile, continues to face immense challenges, even as he attempts to rally support from allies in the industry. His credibility has been dented not necessarily because of proven missteps, but because of the sheer volume of narratives casting doubt on his judgment and intentions. Each headline, each court development seems to chip away at his standing and force him into a defensive posture. Supporters argue that this is exactly the result one would expect if a $9 million campaign were deployed against him, a relentless cycle designed to erode his foundation, without ever needing a single knockout blow. For Lively, the effect has been the opposite while she faces criticism. In some quarters, the broader narrative has largely painted her as embattled and sympathetic, shielded from deeper scrutiny by a protective wall of positive press and carefully managed messaging. Critics point to her silence on key moments as strategic, refusing to be drawn into messy debates and instead allowing the narrative to move in her favor, while Reynolds works in the shadows to secure the battlefield. Legal experts observing the case have noted that the filings and motions in this dispute have been unusually aggressive, suggesting resources and strategies that far exceed what is typical in a dispute of this kind. Some argue that this reflects the kind of deep pockets and relentless determination that only someone with Reynolds' reach could maintain the battle, then becomes not simply a legal one, but a war of attrition designed to exhaust Baldoni until retreat or settlement becomes his only viable option. Media analysts add another layer to this story, noting that Reynolds' long relationship with press outlets and his mastery of social media campaigns have likely played a role in shaping public perception. His reputation as a witty, approachable figure has allowed him to cultivate strong goodwill with platforms and journalists alike. And in times of crisis, that goodwill can translate into favorable coverage or the suppression of more damaging angles. The interplay between media, legal filings, and public opinion becomes the real battlefield, where victories are less about verdicts in court and more about shaping how millions of fans and industry stakeholders perceive the players involved. As this saga deepens, it has also begun raising uncomfortable questions about the nature of power in Hollywood and the extent to which those with wealth and connections can shape outcomes in ways that the public may never fully see or understand. If Reynolds is truly the mastermind, then this is not merely a story of one dispute, but a case study in how influence operates at the highest levels. Observers warn that the outcome could set precedents not in law, but in the unspoken rules of Hollywood disputes, showing that those with resources can not only defend themselves but fundamentally alter the narrative terrain upon which their battles are fought. Yet the danger in such a strategy is overreach, because while power can silence opponents for a time, it can also draw scrutiny and backlash, especially if the public begins to sense that narratives are being artificially controlled. The very strength of Reynolds' charm-based image could become his greatest vulnerability. If revelations show that he has been manipulating events from behind the curtain, some cultural critics are already speculating that this saga could mark a turning point where fans begin to question the authenticity of celebrity narratives more broadly, and where the glossy image of stars begins to be seen as the product of machinery rather than genuine personality. Baldoni himself has leaned into this theme, portraying himself as a victim of powerful forces aligned against him and appealing to values of authenticity, integrity, and perseverance. His supporters argue that even if he cannot match the $9 million resources aligned against him, he may yet win in the court of public opinion. If audiences begin to perceive the campaign against him as unfair or manufactured, the question that now looms large is whether the truth will eventually emerge in a way that clearly links Reynolds to the strategy, or whether it will remain shrouded in speculation patterns and circumstantial evidence for those who believe Reynolds is the mastermind. The challenge lies in proving it and in exposing the mechanisms by which influence has been exercised. Until then, the battle continues to rage both in the courtroom and in the court of public perception, and each new headline, each leaked detail only deepens the mystery and the stakes of a drama that has already come to symbolize the collision of power, image, and truth in modern Hollywood. As the narrative continues to unfold, the question dominating every conversation within Hollywood boardrooms, legal circles, and entertainment commentary platforms remains centered on how deep Ryan Reynolds' involvement in this saga truly runs. The whispers suggesting he is the mastermind behind a $9 million takedown campaign against Justin Baldoni are no longer confined to speculative blogs. They are now being echoed by industry veterans who recognize patterns too precise and too consistent to be dismissed as coincidence. The careful choreography of media coverage, the timing of legal filings, and the subtle reinforcement of favorable narratives for Blake Lively all point to a strategy that seems guided rather than organic. It is this very precision that has fueled the belief that Reynolds, with his reputation for business brilliance and narrative control, is orchestrating events from behind the curtain. Observers who have tracked the trajectory of Lively's legal battle note how seamlessly her image has been preserved despite mounting controversies. While Baldoni, once celebrated for his sincerity and vision, has found himself repeatedly cornered into a defensive stance. He is described less as a challenger and more as a figure struggling to survive the storm around him, which conveniently erodes his influence and undermines his credibility. This erosion does not happen by accident. It requires a steady infusion of resources and strategic direction, which, analysts argue, align with the mysterious $9 million campaign. Insiders estimate that such a sum would cover not just attorneys and public relations specialists, but a broad spectrum of influence, from private security ensuring discretion to media consultants who know how to seed narratives across platforms, and even potential lobbying within Hollywood guilds to quietly shape how insiders perceive the conflict. Reynolds, as a figure uniquely positioned at the crossroads of acting, entrepreneurship, and media branding, has access to the very networks that could facilitate such an operation. His investments in companies, his partnerships with corporations, and his extensive goodwill with journalists and digital platforms create an infrastructure that can be activated when needed, and in this case, the need was clear: to protect his wife from reputational harm and to eliminate Baldoni as a credible challenger to their dominance. What makes this case particularly fascinating is the psychological layer, because Reynolds' public image is built on humor, charm, and relatability. It stands in stark contrast to the ruthless strategist now being speculated about. Fans see him as the approachable everyman, yet behind closed doors, his moves resemble those of a corporate tactician running a high-stakes playbook. Critics argue that this duality is not unusual in Hollywood, where stars often wear two faces, one for the cameras and one for the power games, but rarely has the gap between perception and reality seemed so pronounced. Some legal experts analyzing the filings argue that the aggressiveness of the strategies deployed suggests not just a defensive maneuver, but an offensive one, where the goal is not simply to win but to dominate, to crush any chance that Baldoni could reframe the narrative in his favor. This aggressiveness aligns with the theory that Reynolds has been guiding not just reactive decisions, but a proactive campaign carefully designed to overwhelm an opponent. The long-term stakes further illuminate potential motives. Reynolds and Lively as a couple have built a brand empire extending beyond films into endorsements, investments, and public initiatives. Their brand thrives on stability, admiration, and trust. A prolonged scandal involving Lively could tarnish that brand, costing them millions in future opportunities. by contrast, eliminating Baldoni as a rival figure not only protects Lively but also strengthens their grip on influence. In an industry where perception is often more powerful than fact, it is in this sense that the $9 million, if indeed spent strategically, would be viewed not as loss, but as insurance securing the couple's position for years to come. Baldoni, on the other hand, faces an uphill battle. His attempts to reclaim the narrative, often drowned out by louder orchestrated voices, appear reactive rather than visionary. His allies argue that his integrity remains intact, but integrity alone is difficult to translate into headlines or to compete with a machine backed by millions of dollars and powerful connections. His situation highlights the asymmetry of power in Hollywood, where resources often dictate not only who wins disputes, but also whose version of events becomes accepted truth. Some cultural critics have gone so far as to describe this as a war between authenticity and machinery, Baldoni representing the former and Reynolds representing the latter. In this framing, the outcome will reveal whether Hollywood still values genuine voices or whether it has been fully consumed by orchestrated narratives and power games. But even as speculation intensifies, there is a lingering risk for Reynolds, because should tangible proof emerge, linking him directly to the orchestration, the very empire he seeks to protect could be undermined. Fans who cherish his humor and humanity may feel betrayed, discovering that behind the mask of charm lies a figure willing to weaponize wealth and influence at unprecedented levels. This risk, however, seems to have been calculated. Insiders suggest that Reynolds, confident in his ability to stay insulated from direct exposure, may believe that speculation alone will never be enough to damage him, provided no concrete evidence surfaces. His distance from the public legal maneuvers leaves him shielded, while Lively remains the visible party to the conflict. In this way, Reynolds can continue to operate as the hidden strategist while maintaining his public persona intact, yet the danger of overreach looms, because the louder the whispers grow, the more scrutiny will inevitably be drawn to his actions. His financial movements, his connections with key media outlets, and the uncanny consistency of narrative cycles could all eventually become pieces of a puzzle that, once assembled, reveal the very orchestration he seeks to conceal. This is why observers believe the next phase of the saga will be critical as Baldoni and his supporters begin to hint at exposing the machinery aligned against them. Rumors suggest that his team may be gathering evidence not just to defend him legally, but to reveal the broader network working to undermine him. If successful, such revelations could turn the tables, shifting the narrative from Baldoni as victim to Baldoni as whistleblower against Hollywood's most carefully curated couple. The stakes could not be higher, because for Reynolds and Lively, the collapse of their narrative machinery would not only threaten their brand but also expose the underbelly of how power is wielded in Hollywood. For Baldoni, it would offer redemption and a chance to reclaim his standing as a voice of authenticity in a landscape dominated by manufactured images. For now, though, the balance remains tilted. The $9 million campaign continues to be whispered about but not proven. The machinery continues to grind, shaping headlines and influencing perception. And Reynolds continues to smile in public, as though nothing is amiss, leaving the world to wonder whether the charming actor they adore is truly the mastermind of one of the most calculated takedowns Hollywood has ever seen. As this saga continues to unfold, one truth becomes clear: the battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni is no longer just a legal dispute. It has become a defining moment for Hollywood power and perception. And standing at the center of it all is Ryan Reynolds, whose name now hovers over every whispered conversation, every speculative headline, and every carefully analyzed timeline. The $9 million figure has become more than a number. It is a symbol of the resources, influence, and determination that may have been deployed to protect Lively and to dismantle Baldoni. Whether Reynolds truly masterminded the strategy, or whether he is being unfairly cast as the hidden hand, the perception alone is enough to change how the public views him for years. He has been the image of charm, wit, and relatability, but now audiences are forced to ask whether that image conceals a far more calculating strategist, one willing to play a high-stakes game with reputations and careers on the line. For Baldoni, the challenge remains steep, yet there is still a path to redemption. If he can frame himself as the voice of authenticity standing against machinery, his struggle may resonate with fans who are increasingly wary of manufactured celebrity narratives. The real outcome of this saga may not come in a courtroom ruling, but in the court of public opinion, where perceptions last longer than verdicts. What is certain is that Hollywood will not be the same. After this revelation, the Reynolds-Lively empire may stand stronger than ever, or it may find itself exposed in ways that even millions of dollars cannot contain, and Baldoni may either be erased from the spotlight or rise as a symbol of resistance against the very machinery that sought to silence him.